Hi, everyone. And I hope the conference is going well and that those of you that are in Melbourne are enjoying being together and also enjoying some warmer weather than the chilly October UK day that seems to have sprung up today on the day that we're recording this presentation. So sorry we can't be with you, but our busy survey wave, as last year, that takes place at this time of year just doesn't allow us the time away from our desks at the moment. And also, I was over in Melbourne earlier this year, and my carbon conscience won't permit another flight of that distance for a little while. Nevertheless, we've recorded a short presentation to bring you all up to speed with the Student Barometer, which is the survey we run for universities and higher education institutions globally, including a large number of the ICE institutions. It's a pre-recorded presentation, but we are recording it as live, so any stumbles over our words, I've made a few already, they are going to remain in the recording and hopefully add a charming vulnerability to the presentation. There's two people you can see on the screen. I'm Nick Pigeon, Director of Surveys and Benchmarking at iGraduates, and I'm joined by Sam Camden, Client Consultant at iGrad and King of all things the ICE. You'll hear very little from me. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes introducing iGrad by way of a reminder for those of you who work with us and by way of an introduction for those of you who don't. And then I'll hand over to Sam, who will take you through some of the highlights from the latest Student Barometer results for the ICE institutions. If we were there with you in the room, we'd have time for Q&A, but I think what usually happens is that Elise shares our details so that you can get in touch with any questions. So a bit of an introduction to iGraduate, and really it's all about telling you about our flagship core survey, the Student Barometer. The Student Barometer survey asks questions about all aspects of the student experience and allows participating institutions to see how their students' scores compare against other institutions in the benchmark. So you can see how your students rate your library, for example, how they rate the accommodation, all kinds of stuff, teaching, the learning, that really all-encompassing survey. Each year, we typically get about 125,000 plus individual student responses to the survey. Some years that's closer to 200,000, depending on which institutions participate. And actually, this year, 2023, is one of those bigger years, actually. The ICE institutions ordinarily contribute around 10,000 responses to that global benchmark. I think Sam might have the 2023 figure for you shortly, but if not, it'll be in and around that. The whole point is, though, that the Student Barometer dataset is a really big, credible dataset, so you can use it to make decisions. The ICE institutions can compare against global benchmark averages of all participating institutions and against a sort of a smaller average of the ICE institutions who participate in the survey. And the survey tells you what your students think about all aspects of the student experience, which ultimately allows you to start to improve things for those students. So that's the introduction. Those of you that saw the presentation that we recorded for the Dubai conference last year will remember me saying some very similar things. So I won't go on before it's revealed that I just say the same things every year. It's better to hand over to Sam to take you through the latest data for the Student Barometer for the ICE institutions. Sam.
That's it. Thank you very much, Nick. So yes, my name's Sam Camden, Client Consultant at iGraduate and the Project Manager of the ICE Student Barometer on the iGraduate side of things. So for the next 10-15 minutes, I'll briefly take you through some of the headline results from our 2023 iteration of the survey, focusing on the overall scores for the ICE versus those of our global benchmark of institutions from the wider HE sector. So here is a full list of the 140 institutions within this global benchmark. So along with the 27 ICE institutions who participated in this year's survey. So the number here at the top is the global base number. So in total, there's 96,209 students who responded to the survey within the global ISBSB benchmark, 10,525 of them from the ICE institutions. So I won't go through this list in any great detail now, but the full list will be available for you to view in your own institutional slide decks, which will be made available shortly. So looking at the response rate, so each one of these pink dots here represents an institution within the global benchmark. And as you can see, there's quite a range of response rates. Okay, so from a low of around 7 percentage points here at the bottom right to just shy of 70% for the highest. So the ICE overall response rate is this blue dot here. So as you can see, you're performing very well in this regard versus the wider benchmark. And at 51%, you're also up on the 42% achieved in 2022. One important piece of demographic info to give you, just so you know what we're comparing. So we're looking here at the study level breakdown, and as you can see, the ICE overall at the top here has a much higher proportion of undergraduate students than the global comparison. That's represented by these blue segments here. So that's 86% for the ICE respondents who are undergraduates versus 63% of those in the global ISB index. So now looking at the Net Promoter or NPS score. So here students respond to the question, how likely is it that you would recommend this institution to a family or a friend using an 11-point scale? So students who score 0 to 6 are classified as detractors, 7 and 8 are called passives, whereas those scoring a 9 or a 10 are your promoters. So basically we subtract the percentage of detractors from the percentage of promoters to give you your NPS score. So your NPS score here on the right is 15. In theory, anything above 0 is a good score, as it means that you're being actively promoted more than you're being detracted. And here you're also outperforming the global benchmark group. But whereas the global NPS has increased slightly from 1 in 2022 to 4 now, the overall NPS for the ICE institutions has fallen by 15 percentage points in the same time frame. So you now have a slightly smaller group of promoters and a slightly bigger group of detractors than you did 12 months ago. The similar but slightly different metric is the propensity to recommend score. So this is based on the question, would you recommend the institution to others thinking of applying here? So like the NPS score, the ICE institutions are on average outperforming the wider sector in terms of those who would encourage people to apply. So we're looking here at the combined percentage total of these two green rows. So that's 76% for the ICE and 74% for the global average. Interesting to note here, though, there has been a 7 percentage point drop on the previous year for the ICE in terms of those who would encourage people to apply. This next slide looks at overall satisfaction. So this is based on a single from the gut question asked towards the beginning of the survey. So overall, how satisfied are you with all aspects of your experience at your institution? So here the ICE institutions are performing ever so slightly below the global average when you combine the percentage of those who are satisfied and very satisfied, these two green segments here, with 88% of your students satisfied versus 89% globally. So important to note here that there's a bigger proportion of your students within this dark green very satisfied category. This also marks a slight fall in overall satisfaction on the previous year for the ICE, down from 90% in 2022. Looking at value for money, so this unsurprisingly tends to have a fairly strong correlation with the students' overall recommendation satisfaction scores. So here your scores are fairly in line with the global average. So 80% of your students are either agreeing or strongly agreeing with the statement, to what extent do you feel that your current course is good value for money? And that's versus 81% in the global comparison group. So we've seen from the last few slides that there has been a slight drop in satisfaction and recommendation since the previous survey. So on this slide, we're looking at more widely across the key sections of the survey. And as you can see, it's a fairly mixed bag of results year on year. So focusing on these blue bars here, so these represent the ICE overall scores. We see that in some areas, such as learning and living, we see an increase in satisfaction. So the latter in particular, we see a 3 percentage point increase on the previous year. On the right-hand side, however, we see some areas in which satisfaction has fallen in the past year. So most notably, more of your students now feel that they have concerns around completing their studies and are more likely to feel stressed than in 2022. On the whole, though, aside from recommendation, we don't see huge swings in either direction. Okay, so now we're going to take a closer look at the satisfaction scores for each of the key sections of the survey. So the first one of these is focused on the arrival experience. So here your students are asked a single question at the beginning of the arrival section. Overall, how satisfied are you with the arrival experience? So as you can see, 93% of students from ICE institutions are either satisfied or very satisfied. Once again, the combination of these two green bars here, and that's versus 92% in the global benchmark. This score is also pretty much in line with your 2022 score. So good for the ICE and a high proportion, once again, in this very satisfied bracket. Important to note that the entire arrival section is only asked to your first year students. Moving on now to learning, the ICE overall is once again outperforming the wider sector, with 91% of your students either satisfied or very satisfied with their learning experience as a whole versus 89% in the global comparison. The ICE overall score here is also up slightly on the 90% achieved in the previous year. And whilst we're looking at learning, we'll take a quick dive into the online learning experience, as this is an area in which the ICE institutions have outperformed the global average in recent years. So the ICE scores here are in blue, with the global comparison scores in pink. So as you can see, the satisfaction rates are indeed higher, once again, for the ICE overall. To pick out some of the bigger differences, for online tests and exams, your students are 6 percentage points more satisfied than those in the global benchmark. It's 3 percentage points for global lectures, online lectures, and 7 percentage points for online group work at the bottom here. And these satisfaction scores are reflected in your students' relative enthusiasm for online study versus the benchmark. So here we're looking at the proportion split between online, so these are the darker segments here at the bottom, and face-to-face, the lighter segments at the top, that your students would ideally like to see in their course or program. So for lectures on the left here, students in the ICE institutions would like to see roughly half of their lectures carried out online, which is similar to what we see in the global benchmark, if a few percentage points more towards the online option. For tutorials, it's again roughly half of sessions that your students would like to see online, and that's versus about 2/5 in the global average. So a larger desire there for online tutorials than the benchmark. Now looking at the overall living experience, if you remember the headline wave and wave chart we looked at earlier, this is the area that saw the biggest increase in satisfaction on 2022, a 3 percentage point higher than the previous year. And the ICE institutions are overall outperforming the global benchmark here as well, with 92% of your students either satisfied or very satisfied versus 89% in the global benchmark. So looking at a couple of slides related to student wellbeing. So the first one of these being on whether your students have any concerns around completing their studies. If you remember again, thinking back to that headline wave and wave slide, there has been a shift of 2 percentage points from these two segments here. So not at all concerned and slightly concerned around completing their studies into these two segments here. But the good news here is that your students are overall less likely to have strong concerns than the global average. And as for how stressed or anxious your students feel, we've also seen a shift from these never, occasionally segments to the quite often and always segments to the right here. So about 3 percentage points on the previous year. And a bigger proportion of ICE institutions, of students at the ICE institutions, are stressed quite often or always than the global average. So that's 39% for the ICE overall versus 36% for the global benchmark. Looking now at the last one of these key sections, so how satisfied are your students with the support services? In this area, 90% of your students are either satisfied or very satisfied versus 89% in the global benchmark. So fairly in line with the wider sector here and just a single percentage point down on your 2022 score. Within each section, there are several elements which students are asked to provide their level of satisfaction with, and this slide is showing those elements with the biggest swings since the last iteration of the survey in 2022. So the blue bars at the top here are showing increases in satisfaction on the previous year. So students at the ICE institutions are 7 percentage points more satisfied with the sports facilities than they were the previous year, 6 percentage points for the cost of accommodation, which is interesting given the global context, 6 percentage points for personal tutors, 5 for financial support, and 4 for the academic learning unit. So looking now at the other end, so these white bars here are showing a decline in satisfaction since 2022. So transport between university locations, laboratories, and learning support are all 2 percentage points down on their 2022 scores. Other friends, that's making friends with students from other countries. This has seen a 3 percentage point drop in satisfaction in the last year, with the surroundings outside the institution seeing the biggest decline at 4 percentage points down on 2022. So these aren't particularly big swings, however, and certainly not compared to what we see elsewhere. Now, it's worth dedicating a few slides here at the end to careers, as future career impact is consistently the #1 factor we see globally in a student deciding where to study. So in response to the question, how well has your experience prepared you for your career goals? 92% of students at the ICE institutions said they felt prepared or very prepared, and that's versus just 78% in the global benchmark. So a very good score there for the ICE overall, and a 7 percentage point increase on your score from the previous year. So looking now at career support expectations. So here we're asking students as to what employment career support they expect from the institution. So the blue bars here are the ICE scores, and we're comparing those to these the pink lines representing the global scores. So expectations are more or less in line with the benchmark, but with perhaps a slightly greater expectation from your students around training, employment, so that's support in securing a job, and representation, and that's contacting employers on the student's behalf. So there is less expectation from your students on the flip side around careers advice, around placement, so that's finding relevant work experience or placement opportunities, and information, so that's things like careers guides or directories and that sort of thing. And finally, looking at satisfaction with career support, once again, the ICE scores represented by the blue bars and the pink representing the global scores. Here we see that in all areas of career support, your students are considerably more satisfied than the global average. So to pick out some of the biggest differences, for employment, that's at the end here, you're 17 percentage points up on the benchmark, 15 for representation, and 14 for placement. So some really good scores there for the ICE. Right, so that's a short overview of the headline results from the ICE survey. So mostly a positive picture, particularly versus the global comparison group. So if you have any questions on the data you've seen today, my email address is up on the screen, so feel free to get in touch. And yes, hope you enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you, Sam. Before we stop the recording, I just wanted to pick up a couple of things. Really quick but comprehensive overview, so thank you for that. As I said at the start, if we were in the room with you, we'd have questions and answers. I've got a couple of question and answers that I'll ask on your behalf. Number one, Nick, you said at the start that there were 200,000 responses in the survey, to which, but then Sam told us more about 96,000. My answer to that would be, and is, that's because Sam's talking about those institutions for whom all students participated in the survey, as opposed to just international students. So my number was based on kind of our wider cohort of international students. But the numbers for the ICE and the benchmark here are the all students, but still a massive credible data set of like 96,000. So that's just explaining that to you. And your next question might be, what would you say are the key things to keep an eye on? Well, looking at that overview, I would say watch out for your propensity to recommend and net promoter score. They've declined since last year, so just something to keep an eye on. And the way you keep an eye on that, of course, is making sure the rest of the student experience is really good, so that it drives a higher propensity to recommend. And also, I'd keep an eye on the mental health stuff, concerns over completing studies, and how often students feel stressed or anxious, because that is a global phenomenon right now. We are seeing those scores kind of go up all the time, and that therefore is a key thing to be very aware of, and alongside that, making sure that you're offering the services that can support that increased demand for mental health support, such as counselling services. Hopefully that's preempted some of your questions. Elise will circulate our details. Sam's details are already on the slide. Thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Bye-bye.